Hello, and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. My name is Alex.
And I'm Tucker. And today we'll be discussing and drinking to The Conjuring 2, made in 2016, directed by James Wan. Conjuring 2 was released 3 years after the first one, and during that duration, no other horror movie other than these two made more money in the box office in their opening weekends. So to say that the movies were popular upon their release would be an understatement. However, it is worth mentioning that The Conjuring 2 was not the second movie in the Conjuring franchise, as Annabelle came out in 2014.
The Conjuring 2 takes the Warrens away from America as they set off to England to take on their next paranormal case. Their destination is the home of the Hodgson's family, where their house is becoming infamous as the Enfield Haunting. In this house, Peggy is raising her 2 daughters and 2 sons.
Most notably, one of the daughters, Janet, has had many encounters with a ghost of an elderly man named Bill Wilkins, even being possessed by him a few times. Once again, the Warrens must disprove the skeptics and debunk this haunting once and for all.
From this point on, there will be spoilers, so if you do not want to be spoiled about the movie, this is your last chance to pause the video. However, we will have our drinking rules posted on the screen now if you are interested in watching the movie with our rules. Without further ado, let's start talking about the rules.
The first rule, as always, is death. If you see one on screen or one is implied, that's a sip for you. For this movie, we also included some premonitions as well as deaths being mentioned. Considering that, we came to a total of 7 sips for this movie.
I'm sorry, Lorraine.
Second, we had 29 sips for this next rule, and you guessed it if you were a regular here on our channel. That rule is you drink whenever you hear somebody screaming, crying, or yelling.
Another rule that is applicable to a lot of horror movies is you take a drink when you see a jump scare. In The Conjuring 2, we counted 14 jump scares, so we took 14 sips from our beverage.
Moving on to some of the other rules we will have for the Conjuring universe, starting with a door opening or closing on its own. If you see this happening, do yourself a favor and have a sip. We spotted this occurring 8 times throughout the film.
Next up, you have to take a sip for each crucifix you see. Well, at times like these, there is no surprise that our mercy rule will be applied here. Even with there being a 5-sip limit per rule during any scene, we still counted 26 drinks for this rule.
Alright, now we can move on to some of the Conjuring 2 exclusive rules. To start, we have the rule, whenever Janet is possessed, take a drink. Janet is possessed 6 times by our count in this movie.
Another rule we have for this movie is when you see the nun, otherwise known as Valak. There were some fun Easter eggs in this movie where you could see your name in the background, and we decided to include those in the drinking photos. With that being said, we saw Valak 10 times, and therefore we had to take 10 drinks.
Our next rule is you have to drink when the crooked man is mentioned, seen, or you hear his theme. This rule only tallied up an extra 7 drinks.
Our second last rule that gave us a total of 8 drinks was drinking each time somebody disbelieves the supernatural occurrences that are happening in the film.
No wonder I can't get a good night's sleep. No, I don't want to hear another word. Now get back to bed, the lot of you!
Last and most definitely least in every way, considering that it only resulted in 5 drinks, if you see a biscuit on screen or biscuits are mentioned, you must take a drink.
And that does it for all the rules for Conjuring 2. The total number of drinks comes to 120. And if you're taking 30 sips per standard 12-ounce can, that equals up to exactly 4 standard drinks.
In this movie, Conjuring 2, there were not a lot of drinks that gave us a silly amount this time around.
Yeah, other than scream, cries, and yells and crucifix rule, which basically gave us 2 of our 4 cans in this movie, everything else was pretty fine for drinking wise.
They were rather low this time around, I'd say.
Yeah, and nicely paced out, again, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all of the other rules were under 15 drinks, which really helped us out. And 6 of those rules were under 10 drinks. So, like I said, it was very nicely paced that way.
So I guess one of the big reasons why this is so well paced is in a lot of the instances in this movie, there were such rules that were applied for the very beginning, such as biscuits, such as, I'd say, the nun or Valak appearing. A lot of those rules were almost tailor-made for the beginning, which is really nice when a lot of the movies end up picking up towards the middle or the end of the movie, for example.
Yeah, when stuff starts to pick up and the climax of the movie starts happening, that's when stuff starts getting intense. So
yeah,
one thing I want to note is the crucifix room. I hated that room, and it's not even as bad as the crucifix rule gets in the Conjuring universe.
Oh yeah, there's one movie that gets pretty bad.
You'll see it later on when we cover it, but yeah, overall this movie was paced out pretty well. It was a pretty average drinking game for us at Cheers to Fears. We had 4 total drinks, and I'd say that's a pretty good amount.
Yeah, the best thing to have in a horror drinking game, I'd say, is paced. It's very boring when there's just a dull point or nothing to talk about and nothing's happening, so you can't drink. Whereas this movie, there was drinks basically very consistently all over the view, so it made it much easier to drink to, along with much easier to actually play along with it. Mm-hmm. As opposed to some where there's just like drink after drink after drink and slows down. That's a lot harder, actually, I feel.
I agree, and at the same time, when it's paced across the whole movie rather than in clusters, it's also easier to follow the plot and actually pay attention to what's going on in the movie.
Oh, definitely.
So that's why I really like this drinking game to this movie. So now let's talk about some of the characters in the movie.
Yeah, of course. The one character that I want to mention is there was the little boy that was stuttering named Billy. The only thing that I want to mention about him is there's almost a trope in Hollywood right now. If you have a horror movie little boy named Billy, they're gonna stutter. So another instance of a character named Billy that stutters is in the new It movies, or I guess the old It movies too. Billy stutters in there, so it was just something weird to see another stuttering Billy. Just a very unique character trait. Yeah. And it applies again here with the same character, same name.
Yeah, I know, that was kind of an interesting catch, and I would have never noticed that, but you caught that right away, and that's I found it pretty interesting to hear about that too. I guess some of the other characters, of course, there's Ed and Lorraine again. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of a weird situation with Ed and Lorraine in this one, because in Conjuring 1, Ed didn't want Lorraine around because he was scared for her well-being because of the incident prior that happened to Lorraine. Yeah. But then in Conjuring 2, it's reversed, and Lorraine doesn't want Ed there for his well-being. Mm-hmm. But it's for the same incident, and why was Lorraine not pushing for this in the first movie? It's like using the same storyline, but then just changing it for, I don't know why they even changed it.
For film's sake, pretty much. It's like they kind of forgot about their own continuity error.
Yeah, it kind of felt unrealistic, like their feelings weren't genuine or something, because it's just like they're flip-flopping.
Yeah, it just kind of took us out of the moment, that's the thing.
It won't open!
Just touching on another character that I thought was actually an improvement from the first film is Maurice is kind of in place of Drew and the cop from the first one.
My name is Maurice Gross. Who are you?
So Maurice is the guy that was kind of with the family throughout the whole time, them being in the house, kind of listening to everything they have to say, believing it all. In comparison to Drew and the cop, I felt like he was just a lot more dynamic. He actually had, I think, lost a daughter or something like that, so he was a little bit more invested in the supernatural. He's seen all these occurrences before, and he understands the whole family's turmoil that they're going through right now at this point. He's just a much more full character than Drew or the cop were in the first movie, I feel.
So I guess just moving on from the characters a little bit, let's talk about the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. So I felt like the soundtrack was fine until it wasn't.
Yeah.
I get that they were trying to create chemistry between Ed and Lorraine with the Elvis song that was playing, but I felt like it took away from the movie a little bit. For example, the first bit of music was good when Ed and Lorraine were going to England.
Yeah.
But then they kept going on with it, and it kind of just, I don't know, it felt like they just did it too often, and it kind of took away from that dynamic, I guess.
If I can't help falling in love with you.
They try to make things more engaging kind of with the plot rather than like the spooky atmosphere, which, I mean, it's fine if you do that, but at the same time, it takes you out of the moment and then just kind of tries to thrust you right back in.
Right.
And I feel like that it doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were just trying way too hard to make a soundtrack rather than try to make something on their own. They basically were trying to take other famous songs from, I guess, the 1970s when it was, and trying to like thrust those into the film.
Mm-hmm. And just, you made a point about soundtracks, and it reminded me of A Quiet Place where they had no soundtrack, yet they were still able to create such a strong dynamic. So they could have maybe taken that sort of approach, and they didn't have to pound the same Elvis song that was playing all the time just to create that dynamic.
I liked it when they played it at the end because I guess obviously it was pretty early on in the movie, so it's kind of their song in a sense. You could say that, whatever.
Right.
At the same time, that was closer to the end of the movie, so you can kind of expect a theme song or something to kind of come to close out the movie, but it was just thrusted in the middle of it when Ed was singing it.
Right, yeah. Another song that I didn't really like in this movie was Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It kind of just felt annoying, and like they could have just stuck to the creepy, ominous music that they used later on in The Nun.
Yeah.
And it would have set the atmosphere a lot better, I feel like.
Yeah, I felt like it was just annoying and super, super forced because it was Christmas time.
Yeah, exactly. So just carrying on with that dynamic a bit, they kind of spent a lot more time in this film with the family without the Warrens. Like with the first one, they brought the Warrens into the picture quite quickly, and in this one, they kind of let the family try and deal with the hauntings a little bit more on their own to try and come up with their own solution before reaching out to Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah, so they had so many other people, like there was the cops, there was the other people just coming in saying like Lego pieces hit them in the head. There were all these other people just basically rotating throughout the house trying to figure out if it was real, if it was fake, if the daughters were faking, if the family was faking. It was a little bit more interesting to see how it kind of was without the Warrens and with kind of the media latching onto it without other people kind of getting involved that were experts such as these demonologists that had been moved before.
Many of the events for this film seem pretty legit as far as the Bill Wilkins side holds up. I guess he was actually found dead in his chair.
Yeah, he was found dead in his chair and he actually died from a brain hemorrhage.
Why don't you just leave these people alone?
Because this is my house.
So that kind of adds a little bit more of legitimacy to the story of The Conjuring 2, and it kind of helps put us into that universe, I guess, and it just kind of seems a little bit more realistic. And then there was also the instance where the daughters were caught bending spoons.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a cool reference that happened in the movie.
I guess the other thing to add with that is a lot of the times, or I guess sometimes, I think it was still Maurice, or maybe it was some other guy, but I think it was Maurice. I believe Maurice found the daughters faking instances a couple of times, and they even said that, oh yeah, we faked some things. But they said like 98% of it was faked. But in terms of that, when you fake anything, then the whole realistic view of it kind of gets taken away completely.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as soon as you fake anything, it's like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. As soon as you fake something and they catch you faking it, they're not going to believe anything else that happens.
Exactly.
So it just makes it, like, it's kind of just pointless at that point.
Yeah, especially something so skeptical as ghosts and like otherworldly things.
Yeah.
That's something, if you fake it, then people are going to be that much more skeptical. Especially if people were already non-believers, you're going to make them it's going to be hard to change their opinion after that.
And I guess another thing that made it a little bit more believable is there was a lot of people that backed up their claims, such as the police in the movie and then the people in the interviews. That's just one more thing that if the police are backing you up, or like there's a bunch of people backing your claims up, it kind of makes it sound more believable, I guess.
Oh yeah. I guess that's the one thing that we haven't discussed about real life events yet, is the Warrens' involvement in this case. Okay, so the Warrens in this case, they A, showed up uninvited, and B, only stayed for an entire day. Also, Ed Warren, I believe he also told this to Maurice or somebody else who was involved.
Right.
Ed Warren said that he could make a lot of money off this case, so you know where his priorities lie.
Yeah, no kidding. Just goes to show that he was in it for the money, and Lorraine was more so because of her abilities, but
Yeah.
Ed just wanted to use those abilities for the money.
And so I guess this is another thing to consider, because the case was widely viewed as a hoax. It became more proof that the Warrens were frauds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's just piles of evidence to prove that. So just carrying on a little bit more with this real case, the next owners lasted 2 months, and then their son saw a man in their room, and he basically just noped right out of that house.
Yeah, they just fucked off.
Yeah. And I don't blame them. I could picture myself doing the same thing if someone in my family
Yeah.
saw.
I would sell the house, try to get a new house immediately.
Yeah.
Live with family for a few weeks until they sell the house. Don't
Yeah.
tell the owner anything. The last thing to add is I looked everywhere for actual evidence of this online. There's no proof that Peggy actually died in the chair, as they said that she did in the end of the movie. I'm not even sure if they still kept the chair. I would have fucking thrown it out.
Yeah.
But anyways, they said Peggy died in the chair. I've looked up and down online and I couldn't see if Peggy actually did. I'm going to assume no, and then it was just dramatized for the movie.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they probably just added it in to make it kind of a little bit more spooky or something for the movie.
Yeah,
Because, like,
for the end of the movie for sure.
yeah, it's kind of just something, it seems too good to be true. For the original homeowner to die in that chair, and then the next homeowner.
died in the same chair.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's like a perfect story almost, so that's probably why they added it in.
Yeah, I think Peggy actually lived in that house until she died, so I think that's true. But she probably didn't die in the chair. So overall, what were your final thoughts of the movie?
Overall, I thought the movie was pretty good. I did enjoy it, and in some aspects, they did some things better in this movie, such as the family dynamic where they tried to come up with their own solutions to the hauntings that were going on, just as an example. But then there were also things that were done worse that I felt made it take a step back. An example of this would be the soundtrack situation that we talked about. Overall, the family in this one I didn't care as much about as the parents. And overall, I'd say that Conjuring 1 was a better overall movie than Conjuring 2.
Oh, definitely.
As is usually the case with sequels, but that being said, I did still enjoy Conjuring 2 and thought it was a pretty decent movie.
Yeah, I like the movie too. I think the one difference is with Conjuring 1, I feel like Bathsheba was a lot less forced than, I'd say, what's her name, Valak? Valak felt so forced in this movie, whereas Bathsheba I felt like flowed very naturally, especially with the real life story behind it.
Right, yeah. And finally, we come to the award ceremony where we award one not so lucky nominee, the Darwin Award. This award goes out to the character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, someone else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Our first nominee goes to the Nottinghams for taking in the Hodgson family despite them being haunted. You could argue that they suspected the house is haunted rather than the family, but even if that was the case, you would think they might at least be a little hesitant to let them in their house, especially a family of 5.
Our second, and only other nominee today, goes to Lorraine Warren for not wanting Ed to come along with her to do these dangerous missions, despite her not wanting to do so last movie, even though she always knew about the vision of Ed's death at this time.
And the winner is Lorraine Warren for changing her mind from movie to movie with little to no additional information to change her mind. It is also worth addressing that we did not have too many fantastic nominations this time around, as there were not a lot of dumb decisions in the film. However, we felt that Lorraine tipped the scale just enough for her to be justified in receiving the award.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into the second Conjuring movie. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know if you think the Enfield hauntings are real, or if Ed and Lorraine were just a bunch of frauds.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next episode where we create yet another drinking game for the Conjuring universe. Next on the menu is the third Conjuring movie, Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. If you want to watch the drinking game we made for the first Conjuring movie, click on the box in the top right now. If you want to see the playlist involving all of our drinking games, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.